Okay, I checked the restrictions on the video, on Trey Smith's video. There's no restrictions, so it should be okay to play it. If they give me a heads up, I'll have to hang up.
People attempted to bury.
The skulls and artifacts in this video are authentic from sites all around the globe. Feel free to share, but please do not download and respect the copyrights herein. Viewer discretion advised.
So tell me straight, Rabbi, have any powerful people
Hi again,
attempted
Diane.
to bury this knowledge?
I'm trying to figure out where was the disconnect in history.
This video is about the Nephilim, a mystery that goes back even further than Babylon. Enjoy the ride. Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God went in to the daughters of men and bore children by them. These were the mighty ones of old, famous warriors of ancient times.
If all the first, second, third century, and then even the early Jewish commentators all stood in the same ground with this, why is there such a disconnect? I researched something interesting. There was a second council in Constantinople from the early Roman Church. This is in 553.
Right.
They decreed that the teachings of Fortune, an early church writer, on the subject of angels should be heresy.
This guy here was found in Peru. And here's a little baby one from Peru. Take a look at that right there. Look at the little fingers on that going up that long head. This, of course, is Siberia, Russia.
Enoch, this is where Enoch was rejected. This is where the early church fathers started becoming objective. And if you see something here really interesting, they even go really far with this. They're even saying that men cannot be possessed of demons in any shape, form, or fashion.
Look at the size of the mallet on that one from Peru. He almost doesn't look friendly, does he? And this one here is from the sands of Iran. This is one of apparently about 20 from a dig site in Germany. Would you say there's anything at all about that guy there that doesn't look, I don't know, human? This one was found in Bolivia. Hold on to your seats. We're going to go over some unique features on these long heads in just a minute. Also found in Russia, Peru. The sheer mass on the back of some of these is astounding. Here's a child being held. Look at the size of that one in the middle. This may be the largest one in terms of head volume out of Peru. Now we're really starting to leave the it looks human range. This guy here was one of 13 found at a dig site in Mexico.
G'day, Phil. Good to see you, mate.
Biblical Hebrew text.
Hi, Han.
And you start finding a lot of strange anomalies. You read about giants when Moses sent the spies over into Canaan, and they described this land being filled full of giants. When the spies come back, they said, we're the size of grasshoppers compared to these men.
The word Nephilim often gets translated as giants. It is true there have been actual giants in history. This is Robert Wadlow. He's the tallest man ever officially recorded in this modern time period. at 8 feet 11 inches. This photograph was taken by Roy Chapman Andrews during an expedition to Mongolia in 1922. The image ran one time in National Geographic magazine. It was never published in the magazine again.
Samuel's describing a guy with 6 fingers and toes, and he's not calling it a deformity. Now, I've seen people with a split toe, but it's a deformity. These are 6 working fingers and toes. I actually found an ancient picture from Babylon of a giant with 6 fingers and toes, and the giant is actually holding a lion, and he is so large that the lion is held like I would hold a cat. Like I'm saying, Trey, only if you're reading in the Hebrew are you going to see how deep this goes and how actually clear it is.
It is curious where the trail can begin to lead when looking at ancient bloodlines. When talking about the word Nephilim, what we're dealing with is a little bit deeper and darker and larger in scope than giantism, a really tall guy, or your favorite basketball player. The term Nephilim became synonymous with giants because that's what they tended to be. It is by no means limited to that meaning. In fact, the word Nephilim is more of an umbrella term for the hybrid children, creatures of any high strangeness, which are actual flesh and blood, biological products of the B'nai Ha-Elohim, the fallen angels.
Well, first, the word Nephilim is actually a plural from the Hebrew word nephal, fallen. And when you say Nephilim, you're basically saying
The fallen ones.
Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 2 says, when men began to increase the number of the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God.
The term sons of God, or the B'nai Ha-Elohim, can mean angels, fallen angels, or, in the book of Enoch, the watchers.
Sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose, and had children by them.
So at this moment, without going off of any of the physical evidence, and before taking a really deep look at these skulls, or peering into the history, and just using the text alone, in any authentic text, whether you're dealing with actual angels or you're talking about fallen angels, these are not Hallmark card creatures. These are extremely powerful entities. Angels often get depicted in artwork with wings. Now, the Ark of the Covenant does have 2 cherubim depicted with wings over the mercy seat. But, key term here, these angels are representing the cherubim at the throne of God in heaven. But I can't find one spot in the entirety of the Greek or Hebrew biblical texts where angels, dimensional beings, B'nai Ha-Elohim, stepping through into this reality, had wings. From the angels at the tomb of Jesus Christ, no wings. All the way back to Genesis, to the angels that visited Abraham, to the angel that dropped the chains from Peter's wrists and said, "Get up and come with me." Every iron-locked door opening before their path, and soldiers seeming to fall by the wayside, unconscious. Peter had some clout with someone somewhere that night. The soldiers that had fallen asleep woke up to be executed the very next day. The truth is, there are wealths of these throughout the text. The helping hand that seems to arrive in extremely particular moments when all hope might otherwise seem lost, or messengers appearing to announce highly specific events in human history, events and moments that would change everything. You know, it almost reads like someone sort of guided how all this comes out. One of the most stunning discoveries of the 20th century is that the entirety of the universe is finite. That's actually extremely powerful knowledge. Reality can appear solid, but in truth, it's 99.9% empty space. The base framework of reality itself, at the deepest quantum level, is not made of matter, but of little statistical probabilities appearing wherever they need to appear next. Even the majestic ticking minutes of time itself are quantized at 10 to the negative 43 seconds. And every single three-dimensional particle pixel of this place is not random. In fact, they're 10 to the negative 33 centimeters. The fabric of reality is finite, almost like a pure data live stream, and it's not random. That's extremely powerful knowledge. It was Albert Einstein who once said, reality is merely an illusion. When you hear the physics guys talking about the universe as a hologram, or saying that our reality is a simplified projection of a much more complex reality, or saying that time, space, and matter are synthetic, I don't know if I like the term projection. It seems far too limiting. Or mathematicians who might say that the whole place appears to be a product of mathematics, which our mathematics are extremely inadequate to describe. It is true that a created thing can never understand the full scope of who created it. Bottom line, that this place is couched in a much larger spiritual and dimensional reality. These are the words of Paul when writing to the Hebrews. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for some have entertained angels unaware. How can a spiritual being, an angel, or even a whole set of fallen angels, give actual birth to its own genetic line of anomalies? How can something spiritual, dimensional, interact with something physical? I'm not sure that the lines are quite that black and white. It was Jude, the half-brother of Jesus Christ. Mind you, this comes right before Jude quotes from Enoch 1:9. Enoch would be the seventh from Adam, the great-grandfather of Noah in the book of Genesis. Genesis 5:24, and Enoch was not, for God took him. God really liked Enoch. And so Jude is saying, even the angels, which kept not their first estate, angels there is talking about fallen angels. The term kept not their first estate has a dual meaning in that sentence. Not just that they left the heavens, but their physical bodies were earthly flesh and material bodies. Jude continues, but left their own habitation he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. These are actual fragments from the book of Enoch, found in the caves of Qumran in Israel, dating anywhere between 100 to 400 BC. And of course, the most famous document and record to come out of those caves was this actual image of a scroll of Isaiah found in those caves, which had scholars literally holding their breath until they found out that every single word has an exact precision matching our current text that is uncanny. This applies to all of the Hebrew texts, by the way, even the Greek Jewish texts. The fragments from the book of Enoch matched up perfectly with copies found by explorer James Bruce in complete Ethiopian Bibles in 1773. The book of Enoch is divided into 5 sections. It's in the Book of the Watchers, where the bulk of the Qumran fragments come from, that Enoch is telling you that a set of 200 fallen angels made physical entrance to this place. This would have been prior to the flood of Noah, as Enoch was the great-grandfather of Noah. In fact, this would have been more than 1,000 years before Noah, as Methuselah, the longest living man ever recorded in the biblical text, lived 969 years. If you do the math on it, Methuselah actually died the very year, or 7 days, before the flood. Curiously, the name Methuselah means his death shall bring, or perhaps more precisely, his death shall bring the judgment. Speaking of strange skulls, skulls like this one here are what the archaeological community often refer to as Neanderthal skulls, like this actual image of a Neanderthal skull on the screen here. Now, there are all sorts of variation, shapes, and sizes of monkey bones on the planet Earth. Monkeys and humans are grandly different in their bone structures. This is a human skeleton, and this is a set of monkey bones, like this actual bone structure of a gorilla on the screen right here. Out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of both human bones and monkey bones, such as the infamous skeletal structure of the small monkey Lucy, seen on the screen here, on the entire face of the whole planet Earth, there are exactly 0 mixtures of half human, half monkey, or monkeys becoming humans. Or the more commonly used terminology, there are no missing links. This doesn't come as terribly surprising to me because, genetically speaking, within the DNA of any living, breathing organism, animals are restricted within their animal kinds. They have certain body plans. For example, horses can breed other variations of horses within their body plans. Same thing with dogs. They can have subtypes underneath that body plan and variations, but dogs cannot breed rabbits or horses. Taking the genetics one step further, every living organism, its digital software coding, its actual DNA, is losing coding over time. It's weakening, deteriorating. It's not just animal species that we are systematically and slowly losing, not gaining, in the order of 1,000 to 10,000 different creatures annually, depending on whose numbers that you listen to. But we're certainly losing things as opposed to gaining them. And following suit with that, the DNA, the actual digital software of life itself for every type of creature, is also weakening with every generation. The same as would happen as if you make a copy of 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 anything, you're going to see it weaken, not strengthen. A Neanderthal skeleton and skull is absolutely identical to a modern human, except for a few key features. The bones are thicker, stronger, more fit. Also, the wisdom teeth down here fit absolutely perfectly. His thick brows can vary in size from skull to skull. A small detail that a lot of people may not know, the human brow of any individual, this bone right up here, continues to grow just ever so slightly through the entirety of a person's life. You may see on an old man's brow, he's got a very defined brow. So if you were to live 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 years, then that much larger brow that you see indenting up right there is precisely how your skull would look. When we pull back in history to our oldest written texts, we're finding redundant accounts of very long lifespans. In the biblical texts, most absolutely and definitely in the Sumerian Kings list, as well as records covering what amounts to little more than settlements following the Great Flood, as is recorded here in the Epic of Gilgamesh, along with the extended lifespans, both before and briefly after the flood. This is the oldest written epic in the entire world. The actual records of King Gilgamesh of Uruk, one of the first kings following the Great Flood. These Neanderthal skulls have varying sizes of large brows. In short, what you're looking at with these Neanderthal skulls is eerily identical to what a human being would look like if they were much more fit than we are today and had lived varying amounts of hundreds and hundreds of years. From a genetic perspective, no one actually knows what causes death or initiates the death process, capping us out in anywhere between 100 and 120 years, almost as if someone flicked a switch off inside the coding. Every single cell in your entire body is programmed to regenerate and renew itself. But when dealing with the topic of the Nephilim, we are by no means talking about elongated years and larger brows, stronger bodies and wisdom teeth that fit perfect like a glove, the extremely long years resting on the large brow of the forehead. Nor are we fiddling around with old monkey bones. The truth, however, is that there are a lot of human-esque bones on this planet which can very easily, even to trained experts, blur the lines between was it human or was it something else. Now, there are a lot of tribes that have done varieties of things to their bodies to achieve a number of different effects, including the binding of the skull to produce this elongated shape on the back of the head. There are some significant differences, however, between even the best of clearly modified skulls, like this skull on the screen here, and skulls that appear significantly larger and much more naturally formed than that, like this actual elongated skull being compared against the bust of either Nefertiti or Akhenaten's daughter, leading many to ask if these tribesmen originally began binding babies' heads in an attempt to copy something that was perhaps a whole lot larger in scope, like this actual skull found in Peru. Some of these are just absolutely massive. There are hundreds and hundreds of them, wildly massive, including children that already have the features. One of the first red flags that you're dealing with something that is incredibly strange is that the actual head volume of the elongated skull is at least 25% larger in its head volume than a regular human or even an old human skull. These are, in fact, quite different. But it's not just that they absolutely have to be enormously massive. There's another difference on just the skulls themselves, which is even more puzzling than that. Every human skull on every single human being should have these two plates in the back of the skull that are clearly divided between the two of them by this crease running towards the back of the head. This elongated skull, however, is not like that, with the crease and the two plates in the back. This skull has one long crease, very defined here, a crease coming back this way, and one very large skull cap. Binding a little baby's head should most certainly not change the genetic bone structure. But it's not just elongated heads we're talking about. We're also talking about giants, like this Thailand image holding the enormous sword and the two fangs or tusks coming out of the mouth. Now, I do believe that's a Babylonian Ishtar right there, depicted as a circular disc, which these three gentlemen are bringing before this very large character. Babylon, particularly ancient Babylon, plays perhaps a critical role in all this. Just second down from Babylon would be Egypt. After the Hebrews were in the wilderness during the time of the tabernacle and about to enter the promised land, in Numbers 13:33, it says this, "And there we saw the giants, the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who were of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers before them." Now, there are some tribes where God told the Hebrews, just conquer the people. And then there are other tribes where God specified, wipe them all out, as if there's some type of a gene pool problem, as is in the case of the Canaanites, the Raphites, the Ammonites, all of which are listed as giants. And then you've got other types of tribes, like, for example, the Amalekites.
The first part of Amalekite means people. The second part of Amalekite, it's an ancient word in Semitic languages that means vampire-like demon. These Amalekites were not human. And a lot of people believe that this is where the vampire legends came from in Romania. And I'm sure the Israelites well knew this by looking at them. I mean, if the Amalekites are considered a vampire-like demon, I'm sure they probably had the features.
Deuteronomy 3:11. Only King Og of Bashan, the giant, was left remaining of the Raphites, the Ammonites, or so the Hebrews believed. But the truth is, giants have been reported in archaeological finds all across the globe, particularly in the United States, which is what most every one of these news articles right here going down the screen are about. Many of them from the New York Times. Some bones are still available, however, like this actual image of a jawbone recovered from a giant skeleton in Nevada that's being compared to a human jawbone on the screen. How large do you think that skeleton actually was? Or the Indian legend of the red-headed giants. Interesting about Indian legends, the symbol of the how is often said to ensure that the other guy does not have 6 fingers. Or the famous serpent mounds in Ohio, where in the 1800s it's reported that skeletons of enormous giants were found around this site that has the shape of an enormous serpent that they mysteriously built, which can only truly be seen well from the air. Following the 1950s and the defeat of Nazi Germany and eugenics, same time period that Americans began pumping out movies about space invaders and men coming from other planets, and deeply religious views of the occult, such as those of Blavatsky, instrumental in the occult beliefs of Adolf Hitler himself, sort of take a sidestep into the shadows. Articles such as these begin to dry up and disappear in roughly about the 1950s. And the skeletons seem to vanish. Many make the strong case that the bone structures disagree with the political formulation of the theory of evolution. Whereas that may be true, there are others who would argue that it's somewhat deeper than that. Speaking of occult, if I shift my attention over in the direction of ancient Egypt, the place that occasionally had kings with very unusual skulls, like this actual imagery here, done using the skull of King Akhenaten. Here's the skull of the 18th dynasty King Akhenaten.
A lot of brain power.
Without any digital effects on it. This piece of artwork is female, believed by many to be Akhenaten's daughter. Here is his son, the child king, in this X-ray on the screen here. The very infamous King Tut, who also had this family had very unique features. Long head in all of the drawings of himself, like this actual drawing of Akhenaten. Notice the crown is very elongated and the strange shape of the body. And this is the wife, Nefertiti, carved in stone. This king moved the most powerful palace in all of Egypt to rule over an area called Amarna, to take the pinnacle of power and throne of the empire from Thebes and Abydos and the land of the old gods, all the way up here to a newly prospering place called Amarna, which is directly across the Red Sea from Sinai. Curious thing about the ruins of this particular dig site, it has a reported 365 outdoor altars, the practice of worship of one god, a mesmerizing place stretching into the horizon. And it's an entirely well-drawn community, all 3 of which are not Egyptian practices. They're Hebrew practices. One thing that Akhenaten and his son, King Tut, both proved is that even god kings can die. Both were killed with remarkably similar bashes in their long heads. I personally think that the visor eye did it in cahoots with the head military general Ramses, great-grandfather of Ramses the Great. But I wasn't there, and the statute of limitations has run out. Akhenaten, shown here with the serpent coming out of his forehead, and his son Tut, were the final kings of the 18th dynasty, later giving rise to the 19th dynasty king, Ramses the Great, immortalized in this statue here, who many believe was the pharaoh at the time of the Exodus. Mernptah, depicted here, standing next to Ra, with the disc encapsulated by the serpent. Mernptah was the next king to take the throne of Egypt after Ramses. He was also the 13th son of Ramses the Great. On his victory stele, depicted right here, makes a strange statement. The people of Israel is laid waste. Their crops are not. I have no idea what that means. Just because your dad, Ramses, hands you an empire, missing at least half of its army and all of its slaves, you can't go getting all bent out of shape about that. But if I am too hot, way backwards in time, that 200 fallen angels recorded as having come in prior to the flood, which is really what's being referred to when you hear terms like mystery religion. Notice the star inside of the golden jewel-covered crescent. Covered in the book of Enoch, alluded to in the book of Genesis, as well as many parts of both the Old and New Testament, as well as ancient texts and hieroglyphs that we'll look at, and writings all across the ancient world, being recorded in large scale prior to the flood, and then in a smaller trickle of a scale following the flood. There are at least 277 flood stories from cultures stretching every conceivable part of the globe. Some of them bringing you right to the front doorstep of that flood, like the Epic of Gilgamesh from 2700 to 2900 BC. Every mountain range on Earth contains fish fossils, marine life, and even seashells found on top of Mount Everest in the Himalayas, extending to include mass beached whale graveyards, turning up in the middle of deserts, like this classic example here, the mass whale graveyard in Chile, the most arid desert in the world. And here's another whale dig site from the other side of the globe in the sands of Egypt. Look at the size of that whale buried in that desert there. Plant and animals are found buried and fossilized in every single layer and strata of the top layers of the earth. Creatures of every possible kind of animal that we see every day are found mixed in underneath the earth, along with mammoth-sized creatures, which don't seem to be around anymore. And these animals of every genre and flavor are often found in mass graveyards, like this actual dinosaur graveyard seen on the screen here, as if the animals were herding, and whatever happened fast, hit all at once, and was unexpected. Strangely, when dealing with strata, it is sifted by sediments exactly as one would expect. There were a lot of water pumping around on the surface of the ground One of the enormous challenges of dating anything is that you have to know what the pre-existing conditions were. For example, this dragonfly fossilized on the screen here has a 2.5 foot long wingspan. Dragonflies take in perfectly the amount of oxygen that they need to fly. If one were to assume that atmospheric conditions, oxygen levels, and carbon levels in the past were like this, when they were actually way up here like this, that would indeed pump out numbers that were very large all across the board. This dragonfly...
There's an actual professor who created a biosphere he created this little ecosystem with life in it. He changed the air pressure and the water pressure and all that, and the insects grew like twice the size they normally do. So he's on to something here with that.
On the screen could not lift up off the ground and fly today. We find extremely high oxygen levels in little bitty air bubbles, trapped in ancient tree sap, even buried in common things that we might not think about. Look at the size of this modern day elephant in comparison to this giant animal here, Bronchiosaurus. Much of this stuff requires an entirely different and much more lush environment. This elephant is about the size in girth as the base of the neck of this animal. Bronchiosaurus would have a terribly difficult time lifting its body today. And that is but one tiny example of an Everest-sized mountain of thousands. The most common method of dating in this present day is using fossils to date geological layers and using geological layers to date fossils. Well, some would call this circular reasoning. One thing that I find fascinating, not only are there mass burials of animals underground, but there are mass burials of trees going all sorts of different directions. Some of them, interestingly enough, going vertical. What this means is that you would have trees that would have had to have been standing up for millions of years while the layers of strata form around the tree. No one really knows how many of these there actually are, buried all over the place underneath the ground. This is believed to be the oldest living tree on Earth. Its name is Methuselah, and its age is believed to be 4,840 years old, give or take, which is interesting because if you're using the Septuagint or the Masoretic texts, and even using Gilgamesh as well as the Sumerian Kings list as a reference point, you're going to come up with a flood date a pinch more than 3000 BC, maybe a few hundred years more. And old Methuselah would have been born just a little bit afterwards. I wasn't there, but I know this, that enormous whales really should not be turning up in deserts, and thousands and thousands and thousands of seashells should not be backpacking through the Himalayas. Trees don't generally stand up for tens or hundreds or millions of years while layers of sediments build up around them. I'm thinking that maybe real big flood did it. Occasionally I'll hear commentators state that ancient India is tens and tens, sometimes even hundreds of thousands of years old. And I've tried to chase the rabbit trails on what they mean by that. It's not just India. You'll find this pulling dates out of thin blue sky particularly in media stuff, a lot. I can't find what they're referencing. The empire of India began following the death of Alexander the Great in 323 BC. You begin to see the rise of the first empire of India, the Mauryan dynasty. Going back even further into the Far East, the rise of the first dynasty of ancient China, the Jia dynasty, its inception at 2000 BC, bringing us full circle to our first empires, which would rise right down here in Mesopotamia, where Babylon would become, and the ancient city of ancient Uruk, where Gilgamesh ruled. Land of the Star, which is rested inside of the Crescent. Babylon and Egypt, the two opening players of occult empires right after the flood. And then dropping down right over here, following alongside the Nile riverbanks, where Egypt would become, and where step pyramids and the first attempts at actual pyramids would begin to rise. Under Djoser in the third dynasty of Egypt, about 2600 BC. Land of the Eye of Horus, and disc between the horns of the most ancient Hathor, both stretches of land dropping down along the fertile land, the so-called cradle of civilization, where little bitty settlements would begin to take shape, with your first tiny fortified cities like Uruk in roughly 2900 to 3000 BC. Coincidentally, both newly developing locations dropping down from right up here in the same area where the boat that saved all mankind is said to have landed. So those 200 angels covered by Enoch prior to the flood does not represent all of the fallen angels that there are. It represents a small portion of the total number of fallen angels, the ones which made entrance to this place, came in and interbred with human beings. This created all sorts of little uglies and unfriendlies, including the giants. There's also indications in the text that this wasn't necessarily voluntary. What some of your oldest pages and little bitty scribbles on earth, including Enoch, in full detail, are telling you is that before that flood, something unfriendly made entrance to this place and was genetically breeding itself, creating its own offspring, turning mankind into a blood-bathed circus of its own unimaginable and twisted design, spreading like a virus generation after generation after generation for more than 1,000 years, until the flood came along, wiping the slate clean, taking everything back down to zero. But then afterwards, another little bitty door opened, and perhaps what was in the past might slowly creep its way back in for a final show. It's my extremely strong opinion that the bulk of the hundreds of truly strange bones and enormous skulls, unlike man, in this video came after after the ancient flood. Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward. Genesis 6:4. Breeding generations. Look at the scope of the size of this child's head. And then breeding even more generations. The size of the eye sockets are enormous. Moving up this large skull. And then dropping down to breed some more generations. And here's another little baby one. And then breeding even more than that. And look at the eye sockets in comparison to the size of the skull atop that tiny skeleton. Enoch 7:3. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and began to devour mankind. It really is absolutely astounding. It's almost impossible to believe that what you're looking at really is real. This one commonly gets called the Royal Redhead. A special thank you to Brian Forrester. As well as his team in Caracas, Peru, for making the footage as well as the elongated skulls seen in this video available. That is one strange head. Enoch continues, and they began to sin against the birds and the beasts and the reptiles and the fish. I have absolutely no idea exactly what that means. But it doesn't sound
Corrupting their DNA, that's what it means.
good. And to devour one another's flesh and drink the very blood. It is curious that whether in a biological or a spiritual sense that is equally as deep, if not deeper, than even the mysterious thing that we call consciousness, which seems in a very real way to plug us in reality at all. There's always something uniquely special about the blood.
It is an interesting verse that we've all heard in Leviticus 17:14. You've heard it a million times.
The life of all flesh is in the blood.
The real word is actually saying the ruach of every sort of flesh is in the blood. It's saying the spirit of the flesh is in its blood, not the life. It is being not a poor translation, but a mistranslation.
It is important to note that after death, the blood is no longer usable. As if it's lost something. Every living organism on this planet is constructed of three-dimensional digital coding, like zip files, pure data, zero junk code in every single strand. Tit for tat, line for line, which opens up click by click by click to become a living biological organism, all of it fitting together like a perfect glove. And deeper inside the genome, the framework of pure biological software and precision operating system, file folders containing actual body plans, digital instructions, coordinating every strand, every cell, every little bitty part, pulling the molecular fabric of every piece together to create a biological masterpiece, literally written, birthed into reality itself from scratch, and seemingly plugged in to neurologically and consciously control every single system of the entire biological masterpiece. It's not just consciousness, the intangible controlling the tangible, which is a paradox. The living blueprint for what you call you is alive in every single drop of your blood. One could quite easily come to believe that there's something a lot larger in scope going on here. It does say in Genesis 1:26 that God himself created mankind in his own image and likeness. It's a powerful statement. When you're dealing with the ancient past, or things which may even boggle the minds of trained physicians, let no detail, no matter how seemingly trite, slip through the fingertips. To truly understand Babylon, the time periods lasting to this modern age, the more recent past from which these skulls likely come, one could easily make an extremely strong case that we are merely infants running loose in very short-term little bodies, biological machines, through which we peer out consciously into this thing that we call the material world, built and constructed right out of thin air by digital coding, light years more sophisticated in each and every single strand than all of the computer software made by man combined, all the way back to the very first computer. What the pages of Enoch are saying, as well as the Hebrew texts and cultures all across this globe, is that something has tried to plug itself in and insert itself into all of that. Enoch is not just talking about a set of very dark, fallen beings and producing their own hybrid children. It goes a lot deeper than that. What he's telling you is that these fallen angels, which produced the Nephilim, neither completely angel or completely human, but something in between.
So what he's literally saying is when they die, their souls come out from the race of giants that came from this union, gave away to a brood of evil spirits. And those are the foul spirits of the earth, the demons.
The Nephilim die, they become or get added to the number of demons, beings which later cultures would call the underworld gods, the shadow creatures from all of the ages of history, things and creatures that can possibly bleed through from a realm that might be just as close as the air between your fingertips. Now, it is always eggs and semen that things like this are after, right? Or be summoned. Notice the little baby down there in the image. There's a big part of me that thinks that that thing there might not ultimately want to be friends. Almost like whatever it is, it's close enough it can see you. Enoch used the term the Watchers. But in terms of evil, the deeper, darker, more twisted and macabre, the better. And the higher the place of the carnage.
These are fallen angels. If you cast them out, the fallen angels can go. They can go to the high places. But these aren't fallen angels. These are demons. These are Raphaim. These are dead before.
Don't forget that I brought up the high places. Sure is a lot of red way up there in this drawing. the more vicious and brutal, the more bloody yet venomous, terrifying and precise. The ceremony as if intoxicating things that dwell in the darkness. One of the most respected names in the field of ufology, his opinion shared by notable others such as J. Allen Hynek, was none other than Dr. John Spillane, instrumental in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Commonly stated his belief that the UFO phenomenon was in fact demonic. Human beings are under the control of a strange force that bends them in absurd ways, forcing them to play a role in a bizarre game of deception. Was Aleister Crowley, a self-proclaimed black magician at the top of a great many of the most predominant secret societies, to give the first drawing during the 20th century of one of these large-headed entities, a character that Crowley claimed stepped through into physical reality. This entity would ultimately become what Crowley would describe as a spiritual guide to him. Wow. After an extensive battery of very intense black magic rituals. You may find some similarities between Crowley's drawing and thousands, if not tens of thousands, of other such entities drawn by people from every walk of life all around the globe. Crowley is quoted as stating, "Today, they call them angels and demons. Tomorrow, they'll call them something else." The UFO phenomenon simply does not behave like extraterrestrial visitors. It actually molds itself in order to fit a given culture. John Ankerberg, John D., the head intelligence officer under Queen Elizabeth in the 1500s. He would do the deepest of interlayer occult rituals, popularizing such ideas as the crystal ball, alchemy, and the philosopher's stone. These long hours of ritual occult on behalf of the Empire of England were done with fellow black magician Edward Kelly. Kelly would ultimately leap to his death from a castle tower window. John D., however, would go on to catalog extensive lists, meticulously detailing out a vast array of entities, which he claimed not only could communicate, but could also physically step right through into the material world itself. Though the public position and statement of the Empire was that D was communicating with angels, D's diary, discovered following his death, told a different story, recording that the entities were becoming more and more evil. Notice the serpents, stating more and more emphatically, "These things are lying to me. They're not angels. They're demons." UFOnauts and the demons of past days are probably identical. Dr. Pierre Guerin, in looking at accounts of claimed aliens, all roads seem to lead to the occult. More specifically, either Egyptian or Babylonian. Ephesians 6:12, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood," the claimed mystery religions themselves, "but against principalities, powers, rulers of darkness." Whether you're talking about something that just appears in the skies, spiritual wickedness in high places, which really does beg the question, where is it when you don't see it? One theory which can no longer be taken very seriously is that UFOs are interstellar spaceships with Sir Arthur C. Clarke, or physically step through into this reality, your ancient texts are taking you at least 10 steps further down the rabbit hole than that. I have yet to meet one person who has come out of the occult that does not have, in some cases, terrifying and extremely tangible and real accounts to give. I also find it particularly interesting when I've gotten to sit down with people who have had life after death experiences, most especially if they were legally dead for any number of minutes and have actual medical records. Hell or ancient shield, whether it be from someone in the occult or someone from an after-death experience, some strikingly eerie similarities. These bland, sort of expressionless, pull-you-in type characters with sort of varying degrees of sinister evilness, described almost like a diminished alternate version of Earth, that the person steps as if the ground level is being described as lower or different, or falls right inside of, with things that literally grab hold and herd the people into actual pit-like cages, wherein at that point the descriptions of the creatures get even worse. Things much more disturbing and twisted than what may channel in to be portrayed as physical artwork and representations of something through the imaginations and the minds of men. Ephesians 2:2, in which you used to live when you followed the ways of this world. What fascinates me is when people look up and they describe, and the ruler of the kingdom of the air, like these sky city type of apparatuses. It's a spirit who is now at work in the sons of disobedience, sort of hover in a murky or black, dark, scarred horizon. Whether in personal accounts or even in Enoch, you get these hints of things that are in the air and things that are moving. But diving below, where the people are quickly snatched and drugged to the side by the apparent welcoming teams, they'll talk about a lot of serpents ranging from enormous creatures to these more or less human-sized things, often with man-like or human-like features, similar to the wisdom serpents or serpent gods found in every single major ancient culture with uncanny similarities. Look at that big old serpent crawling inside of the crescent-shaped moon between the two Babylonian Ishtar stars. I do believe you're going to find the serpents like the one these three fine fellas are praying to in nearly every belief and religion on earth. The serpents, no matter what size or shape they're described as, just like any of the other characters within the plays, always have this ancient, old one, yet vicious and precise, kind of highly intelligent twist. It's also noteworthy to point out the similarities historically of bones or warped protrusion like horns, is in this recreation of Egyptian artwork. Notice the extra set of horns on top is empty, whereas in this rendering, between the horns, you've got this little disc resting on top. An environment described at the core that's beating hard, decrepit, almost with this vibe of mechanical madness combined with living dead organism of tentacles and fangs. What some might have been calling the second heaven, the said diminished realm well beneath heaven, and decrepit much more than the earth, littered with sophisticated type things in its skies, where the fallen angel, Lucifer himself, is said to rule for a short span. Almost like hitting the show code key, the virus side of reality, and cavernous meeting of breath and a drop of water flames. Probably the most terrifying part of all of it is that the things there wanted you there, in their clutches for some reason. It's a prison that collects things that no one will ever come to help. I'm not going to physically or personally go in to check any of that out. I'm willing to take other people's word for it. Was Jesus Christ who described heaven as a place full of many mansions and likened hell to this actual place here, Gehenna, outside of Jerusalem, where the trash was burned. He was giving this analogy to common men, to sheep herders, couched in a way that they could understand it. As if the human body itself is nothing more than a shell, a vessel, a confining temporal instrument, binding one to a specific location in both time and space. Of those who have tried to describe heaven, though there are so many, from every possible age range, background, and culture, Enoch's pre-flood account is extremely precise. People commonly talk about this unusual event called the rapture in the Bible. There are technically 7 of them, by my count. Enoch is the first one on that list, and he is the 7th from Adam. Wonder if that has a meaning. He stumbles for words at least a dozen times in his document, stating to you, I wish I could describe what I'm looking at. And then afterwards, talking about this place as if it doesn't even feel real anymore. Now, to understand these things called Nephilim, or the origins of physical evil, important to recognize the entire scope. But perhaps before taking a critical look at that pre-flood world of Genesis, or the kings with enormous lifespans before the worldwide flood in the Sumerian kings list, or analyzing the pages of Enoch, great-grandfather of Noah, I want you to notice the Greek Titan. Creature is part God, part man in this image, with his arms like a crescent, holding a large disc in the middle. Same as what Gilgamesh claimed he was in the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest written epic on the face of the planet Earth. The Titans, the sons of Saturn, or sons of Satan. And this isn't just Babylon or ancient Sumeria, the place of the Anunnaki, the biblical sons of Anak, kings and rulers of ages past, reaching out their hands to summons the deepest regions of darkness in an effort to beckon things that bite the very hand that feeds into this place.
I've got one. What do boy bands and rugby players have in common? What? Always getting clipped.
Place. The sacrifice of little children, deeply seated, derangement, shedding of innocent blood to Moloch or Baal, working darkness into a frenzy, playing the drums louder to drown out the screams, almost like a virus reaching out to grab its own desires through an extremely naive host. To mass ritualistic human sacrifice, notice up here above that the serpent is waiting. It's almost as if the idea is that they're feeding something, that the moment his eyes roll closed, that there's something on the other side waiting for him to come through. Notice how the serpent is used as encapsulation, as if to define ownership. It says something really fascinating in Genesis 3:15, right after the eating of the fruit and the serpent in the garden. It says, I will put enmity between you, the serpent, and the woman. The serpent is coming out from the forehead, the place where the third eye, or the mind's eye, would be placed. The eye of Horus, or the all-seeing eye, floating mysteriously above the pyramid of bricks built by men. As a side note, it is curious how strikingly similar the eye of Horus looks in comparison to a human pineal gland inside the brain. And dimensionally peering into this world through the glass darkly. And of course, the Inca, with the symbol of this little bitty owl sort of peering through. And between your offspring, the seed of the serpent, and her offspring, he shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now take a good look at these symbols that look like little horns with a circle inside them on top of the head of these two serpents. Here's an enormous version of the same symbol. You're going to find quite a lot of these in ancient Egypt, perhaps quite often on the head of an Egyptian goddess, and there's the little serpent. But it doesn't always have to be represented like that. For example, this golden cow's head here. See here, even the cow's got a little serpent with the two ears or horns that make sort of a cradle. Stars always representing angels inside of it, with the sun shining light out from behind the ears inside of the cradle. But the sun also sort of looks like it makes an eye-shaped appearance going around it, or a crescent moon with a star. Now, when you're talking about stars, like this large representation of a Babylonian Ishtar sitting couched inside of its crescent, the stars, when used in ancient texts, are extremely often symbolism for angels, or perhaps even a very particular fallen angel. The answer goes all the way back to the Temple of Hathor, to the mega complex of Dendera. Hathor goes all the way back to King Narmer himself in Dynasty 0. That's King Narmer right there, from the Narmer palette found in the Temple of Horus. Notice up here the long crown on the head of the king, and at the top of the palette of the first king of Egypt, the first symbol of the face of Hathor, a literal temple for storing the history all the way back to the inception of ancient Egypt itself, with the symbol of Hathor crowned atop the serpent's heads. The Egyptians believed that the kingship of all Egypt started with one named Osiris, a dead man who would be brought back to life by Isis. Osiris would be infilled and reanimated by the spirit of an underworld god. Notice the wings on the goddess. And then up over here, the little horns with the disc in the center. The flesh of the reanimated Osiris is generally a murky bluish green. This union of a resurrected dead man and a winged creature would give birth to what they called Horus, Notice the disc in this image no longer is encapsulated with horns, but instead is simply wrapped with a serpent. This shape is not two horns. It's the shape of a woman's womb, which is why it's on the head of a fertility goddess. And the solar disk or sun disk in the center is just like the star was for the Babylonians. And the sun in their hieroglyphs is owned by the serpent, the symbol for the ruler of the air. Inside the crescent, the birth canal, or the moon being represented in the feminine, in which the sun symbolically has rested inside of, and producing Horus, the new little eye that is peering through and watching. Notice down here the serpent, again with the little disc on its head. In fact, at the entrance to the Temple of Hathor, where this enormous symbol is, there are actually 17 little bitty serpents underneath that humongous symbol. It's like a little identifier. This plus this equals this. It's like a Post-it note for the ancient beast. Popped right on top of their heads. Move out of the way. We're making underworld gods here. All right, they're a bunch of demons. And, of course, serpents in every possible and spiritual sense. Whatever may have been the exact details of what the Egyptians were trying so dearly to express, the underworld gods are not being displayed as just basic common day-to-day knowledge on their walls, but more than that, the focal point of the entire empire. It was an oppressive place. Here's a character from the walls of Egypt that you may recognize, or perhaps you're more familiar with his updated version. The star in the middle of the two horns. Even got two serpents down here coming out. The goat of Mendes. This text is from the Egyptians' most treasured document, the Book of the Dead, chapter 175, where Atum would later combine with Atum Ra, herein listed as the High Supreme God, states this: "Then I will be what will remain, just I and Assur, when I will have changed myself back into the old serpent who knew no man and saw no God." The pain, poverty, and hardship common people does seem to follow that star. Cambodia, you have the Naga serpent kings. In Hindu, Vishnu sleeps in the cosmos, nirvana, with the serpents. Perhaps King Solomon was right. There's nothing new under the sun. Most all ancient cultures, particularly Babylon and ancient Egypt, believed that their gods, which could be physically summoned to manifest, were in the underworld. When you hear Luciferians and occultists throughout every age talking about the ability to summons little spookies, things that most certainly do not have your best interest at heart, or entities, very tangible things. Not only does it hate you, it wishes that it could be you. It's my extremely strong opinion that they are not making that up. This was believed to be a dimension running parallel side by side with the earth, and equally as real, a place full of hate, anger, bondage, terror, total lack and despair, a place where mankind is herded up and cast to the fangs of a vast array of frightening things. But in the very halls of pentacles of power throughout the ages of earth, men from nearly every age of empire, both great to small, in pursuit of mankind's age-old hang-ups, lust, greed, power, or the really big one that goes all the way back to the serpent in the garden itself. You shall become as gods. Softly whispered lies, almost like the whole thing is a test. Trinkets in exchange for everything. Now, if we go back just a pinch before the first step pyramid in Egypt under Djoser, and I hop back over here to the land of Samaria, later Babylon, to the little tiny settlement of Uruk, called by many the oldest city in the world, and by some the rising New York City of the ancient world, is just outside ancient Uruk, where Nimrod, the first king, the one recorded as having been in defiance to the Lord God, one of the great grandsons of Noah, drawn here, deified in this 4,000-year-old recreation of an artifact and artwork from ancient Nineveh. Or, in the Sumerian writings, the legend of Enmerkar, the king of Uruk, who actually built the great tower that has come to be known in history as the Tower of Babel. The name meant Gate of the God. You can view the Tower of Babel like one enormous mega invocation ritual. They're recorded as inviting something from the darkness to step up from its lair. Was at that point that they described something sort of human-like entered. 2 Corinthians 11:14. Even Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. The Sumerians called it the Enki, as seen on this actual inscription. He's making entrance through this little doorway with these lines around it, surrounded by these two characters with heads that look something like this. And the Enki was called the Lord of Earth, the giver of knowledge, or the morning star. Sometimes the word Abzu, or the symbolism, like these little wiggly lines here, gets translated as waters. It's not quite correct. The word Abzu means abyss, which is where the Enki, being summoned here, is coming forth out of. This stretching scape of land right here is believed to be the remains and ruins of the Tower of Babel, the place where in either the Sumerian texts or the biblical texts, the tongues were confused and the people began to fan out, or the ancient ziggurat of Eridu, just 12 kilometers outside of And of course, the very word Babel today means confusion. If you take all of your pages and hours of history, you're dealing with a tale of two cities, Israel and Babylon, spiritual light or conversely, spiritual darkness. Everything in this place has a lower level meaning and a higher level meaning. After the Hebrews left Egypt, the land of Osiris, Ra, the eye of Horus, and entered Sinai following the plagues of Egypt and the parting of the Red Sea, the Ark of the Covenant and the mercy seat between the wings of the two archangels, placing the Ark inside the Holy of Holies at the very center of the temple, where the high priest would go in once a year. He would sprinkle the blood of atonement on the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant. Speaking of power in the blood,
understand, Trey, Moses wrote this 2,000 years before Yeshua was born, before Jesus was born and crucified. So when you say God's sacred name, and the high priest was sprinkling blood on the Ark of the Covenant, and saying God's holy sacred name, sprinkling blood on the Ark, he would be saying Yahweh, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And the word picture is behold the hand, behold the nail.
Once a year, in the center of the tabernacle, in the heart, that's the unspeakable name of God, by the way. In the Holy of Holies, while putting the blood on the Ark of the Covenant, the high priest sprinkling the blood once a year would be saying, behold the hand, behold the nail. Surrounded by the encampment of all of the Israelite tribes, God gave some very tedious instructions on the setup of this camp in the wilderness, with the Levite priests dead in the center, in fact, itemizing out what the exact population numbers were of each of the tribes that were camping. Sometimes the most curious things are buried right in plain sight. I saved some time for you. This is what exactly that camp would have looked like. Does the shape of that precisely calculated out layout look familiar?
No way.
This image here is precisely what the shape of the Israelite camp would have looked like. Of course, the Levites and the tabernacle itself were right in the center, the heart, right there. And deeper inside that middle, in the heart of the holiest of holies, where the priest would stand before the mercy seat itself and say the unspeakable name of God, behold the hand, behold the nail. This is more than 1,500 years before Jesus Christ.
Wow.
Was a moving cross out there on the desert floor. That would have been so mesmerizing to have seen looking down with all the little campfires going from the sky at night. Let's see if we can take that a step deeper. Curiously, if you take the names from Adam all the way down to Noah in the book of Genesis, and you look at the root meaning of those names, this is what it reads. Man, appointed mortal sorrow, the blessed God shall come down, teaching, his death shall bring the despairing rest and comfort. You'd have a terrible time convincing me with some Hebrew scribes concocted that in the Genesis text. Nonetheless, let's go deeper than that. Pre-flood, Book of Enoch. He goes further than just...
I think your name very much hints at your character. I think you're named after your character.
Fallen angel.
I think your name's very, very important.
And hybrid offspring. Enoch is redundantly prophesying the coming of this Son of Man, laying out that at a time in the future, not only will what has been done be undone, but further, that through his name, they shall be saved. There are at least 365 extremely specific prophecies of the coming of that child and the sacrifice of a Savior. The Passover began before the final plague in Egypt, before the Israelite slaves marched out of the largest empire on earth, fulfilling every single rule of a Passover sacrifice, no less. And before the final plague of Egypt, they were to put the blood of the Passover lamb on their doorpost. Curious what meanings can be found in things when you're willing to scratch. One curious detail, the symbol of the Tav during any Canaanite or pre-Canaanite time period would have looked something like this. It is true that the ancient Tav, meaning sign or mark, perhaps covenant, looks something exactly like this. Crucifixion would not even become a practice until 5 ages of empires later.
Wow, what a pickup. Crucifixion wasn't a... Wow.
Under the Romans. It is interesting that the blood would be saving their firstborn sons. God would be giving up his. In fact, even done on Passover Day. While the kings of earth were throwing babies onto open fire pits and flames, sparing no expense to build the grandest of towers and ziggurats to feed darkness their subjects' lives, to satisfy and appease the unending thirst of their little bitty otherworldly underworld gods. Something tells me that in a minute here, the underworld gods and the shadow people are going to have a role to play in all this before we get to the end.
Who are the shadow people?
It's the new Breeder's Choice Plus ginger. Choose better. Choose ginger.
Whoosh.
What greater love could one have than to lay down their life for the friends? Here's the empty tomb where Jesus was for 3 days. That 365 specific prophecies about Jesus Christ by no means includes the fabric of patterns. There are at least 4 times that many for the second coming. The hours when all the old scorecards get tallied up than there are for the first. Restoration and the entrance and return of the King. But out of all of those prophecies, there's only one other person other than Enoch who used this term, Son of Man. That would have been Daniel, who survived the lion's den, well, in the very heart of Babylon, no less. It's astounding how these things work out. It was Daniel who interpreted the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the 5 empires leading to the end, including Nebuchadnezzar's own, and not including the 2 before it. That makes a total of 7. I wonder if that means anything. But an angel would appear in the later years of Daniel's life. More specifically, Gabriel, the same angel that came to Mary prior to the birth of Jesus Christ, as well as believed to be an angel at the tomb after the resurrection. And not only give him a tit-for-tat, sentence by sentence, line for line walkthrough of coming history, and we know that none of that precision was done after the fact, because the Septuagint, which included Daniel, was put together under Ptolemy during the 3rd century BC, as is seen in Daniel 11, beginning with the kings of the north and the kings of the south, the Seleucid and Ptolemaic empires, predicting even the unlikely rise of the little-known underdog, which would later come to be known as the Empire of Rome. Those are some really impressive guesses, but by far the most impressive of the entire bunch is that Daniel would predict the exact day and date that Jesus Christ would enter the front gate of Jerusalem on the back of a donkey, fulfilling Zechariah 9:9, that the people rejoice as the king cometh on the back of a foal donkey. This would be the 10th of Nisan, or more precisely, April 6th, 32 AD. 4 days before the crucifixion. Daniel is giving you the exact starting point. Daniel 9:25 states, "Know and understand this, from the time that the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the king, comes." The date that a Persian king gave the decree of Artaxerxes on March 14th, 445 BC, to restore and rebuild Jerusalem after the Persians had defeated Babylon in exactly the way, by exactly the guy, Cyrus, that Isaiah had predicted 200 years in advance. Countdown leading to the precise day, and writing this more than 500 years in advance. It brings new meaning to when Jesus Christ told the Pharisees, "You think that in those scriptures you have eternal life, but it's those very pages that speak of me." Because of the mass reports of healings and blind eyes open on many occasions, the masses had wanted to make him king, but he never allowed them to praise him and declare him out as king until one very particular day that Daniel had given the math for more than 500 years in advance. Arriving at the front gate of Jerusalem, the religious leaders, the Pharisees, told Jesus, "You have to shut these people up. This is heresy." Jesus replied to the Pharisees, "If I were to silence these people, indeed I tell you, even the rocks of this place would cry out." If you do the math from the decree of Artaxerxes to the triumphant entry, this point here, 69 times 7 times 360, using the identical calendar system of the ancient world, most especially Babylon, making provision for the 24-day difference between March 14th and April 6th, as well as your 116 days added in for leap years, you're going to come up to exactly 173,880 days. On the money. Daniel's margin of error. More than 500 years beforehand from that angel's lips.
How'd he work that out, I wonder?
Precisely 0. But if I hop backwards, much before Daniel, before even the young King David, stamped into the pages of history for the highly unusual, miraculous defeat of a six-fingered giant named Goliath. But going back past even David, the one often called a man after God's own heart, beyond the days in the wilderness, then even the time in Egypt, back to our first little starting gate cultures, down here in Egypt and over here in Samaria, the place of ancient Uruk, where Gilgamesh, depicted here as statue, ruled. right here to the land and area of Ur. Now that is a giant holding a lion, right?
And look at that. The lion's the size of a pussycat. Wow.
Where Abraham, the father of all the future children of Israel, was living. Many believe that Abraham could see the base of the Tower of Babel while growing up. And then it begins a little something like this. Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show unto thee. Abraham would ultimately travel over here to exactly where modern day Jerusalem is. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great. And thou shalt be a blessing, and I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. That's a very big promise. One night he woke up with hot sweats and horrors that the Lord had shown him that his descendants would be slaves in a foreign land for 400 years. But that God himself said that he would judge that nation. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Genesis 12:1-3. What those pages are telling you is that the Hebrews, Israel, was the delivery system for the Savior of all mankind, leading full circle to the most well-known passage in the whole masquerade of particles that makes up the planet Earth. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish, but have everlasting and eternal life. And every single possible thing, short of the kitchen sink, tried to stand in the way of that. What those pages are saying, all of them, is that you, no matter who you are on the other side of the screen, were born above even the angels. Someone asked me the other day how I truly thought that the entire universe was held together. I was stumped by the question. Here's my answer. It's love. Totally undeserved love. Never listen to snakes because they're snakes. You were born to be free in every possible sense, in both this life and the next. It's my extremely strong opinion that the shadow people are not your friends. Go on your own journey to ask these very same questions. Your life is worth that. Oh, before I forget, Jesus did say another thing to his disciples. In Matthew 24, it says, "So it was in the days of Noah, so also shall it be in the day of the return of the Son of Man." One can only wonder what exactly that might mean. It is true that the grand finale of any fireworks show is always at the end. I'm Trey Smith, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Here's some fireworks for you.
Okay, guys, we've got one more of his for today, and then I'll hang up. Goes for an hour. Babylon Beast, the origin. Trey Smith goes for an hour, which will take me out to 3 hours, which is what I usually do.
Is on the Babylon Beast, or the Beast of Babylon. Even if you're an atheist, you've probably heard this terminology before, or the concept or term Mystery Babylon, which of course has both its physical and spiritual origin all the way back with the Tower of Babel and Nimrod, or Dark Lord Nimrod, which is not only the actual birth of the literal Babylon, but the spiritual system of Babylon. That being stated, we should probably begin with what the biblical pages state about this Babylon. In Jeremiah 51, for example, Jeremiah prophesies that Babylon is going to be ultimately destroyed. The physical, literal Babylon, which occurred. Yet in those same texts, it appears that he's looking forward also to something larger occurring with Babylon, a mystery Babylon, from Revelation chapter 17. And it states this: one of the 7 angels who had these 7 bowls came and said to me. Now, in the book of Revelation, you're not going to be able to count up all the uses of the number 7. 7 is a number of completion. But I'd like to highlight this right here, that there are 7 angels that Yohanan, or John, he's the author of the book of Revelation. He was also the only one of the disciples who was present an author of your biblical text who was present at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And in Revelation 17, he writes this: one of these 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and said to me, come, and I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits by many waters. With her, the kings of the earth have committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. Now, this woman, this prostitute, is going to turn out to, in the text, be a city. John continues in this vision. I've also summarized the text, but I've condensed some of it, and I'll point out some of the places where in a second. This is a prostitute, she held a golden cup in her hand, and it was filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. Now, she was also wearing purple and scarlet as her outfit. Now, this city that's being referred to is commonly compared to New York City. It's commonly compared to perhaps a rebuilding of the literal Babylon. I'm less convinced on that one by a lot. It's commonly compared to the city of Rome or the Vatican, along with a list of others. But I'd like you to bear in mind that
personally, I think it's more likely Rome, the Catholics, Vatican. That's the whore, that's the beast.
No matter what anyone speculates that it literally is, or the time frame this text should literally be happening in, maybe right now, I'd like to point out that the Mystery Babylon is just as Nimrod's empire was more than just a tower and a literal Babylon, it was a spiritual abomination. It was a spirit of Babylon, if you will. The name written on her forehead, this prostitute's forehead, was a mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and abominations of the whole earth. Passage 6. And I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of God's holy people, the blood of those who bore the testimony of Jesus Christ. Now, the
Catholic Inquisitions.
This woman that he saw was not just wearing scarlet and purple, important colors, but she's sitting on a scarlet beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. Now, the 7 heads are told to you in the text to be 7 hills, but also representing 7 kings. 5 who have been, 1 who is at the time of the writing of the document, and 1 that is yet to come. Now, for the purpose of this particular film, I'm going to lay some of that symbolic language just in your hands. So I want to move into the origin of all of this. John continues, 17 verse 8, the beast which you saw once was, so this was a beast that was in the past, is what it's stating. Once was, now is not. It's not there at the time John is writing. Yet will come up again out of the abyss and go to its destruction. So this is a beast that was at the beginning, just like Nimrod's empire was, or Babylon was. It is not at the time of the writing of this document, but will come again at the time being seen in the vision. Yet will come up out of the abyss and go to its destruction, and the inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life. I'd like to underline that right there. In the pagan texts, they often talk about these tablets of destiny, as if Ham taught his sons, even Nimrod taught his generations beneath him. Ham, Cush, and you have Nimrod. They were teaching, and all of their pagan documents that we point out in many of the films at God in a Nutshell, they have this terminology, even Marduk, the Babylonian Marduk, who's always writing. He's got a pet dragon. He's always boasting that somewhere in the back rooms, he's got these tablets of destiny. I don't believe there were tablets of destiny that he had in the back room. I believe he's copying from his righteous men and his lineage, and so was Nimrod, and they're talking about this book of life, where the names of the righteous are written, the same book of life that God showed to Moses on the mountain. But every time you see these seven angels, like in Revelation, you have these seven angels, you're going to have discussion of this book of life. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life, will be astonished when they see the beast. Then the angel said unto me, the waters that you saw where the prostitute sits, they represent, so he's explaining the vision, the angel's explaining the vision, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues or languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. This is the fascinating part. Will hate the prostitute. So they're drunk with the wine from her, but they also hate her. They will bring her to ruin and burn her with fire. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth in the times that this document is looking forward to. And then when that city is destroyed, the prostitute city is destroyed, where all of the kings of the earth got drunk off of her. After they destroy her, they're going to weep and cry for her. Now, if we were to literally turn the page in the book of Revelation and go over to Revelation 18, we're going to learn that this city that's referred to as a prostitute, that she's destroyed in 1 hour, and that this is the city where the kings of the earth meet. And of course, purple and scarlet, particularly at the time that John is writing that document, well, purple is one of the most prized. It's a sign of riches, and it's a sign of abundance and wealth. This is why when they were mocking at Jesus, they're covering him with a purple robe while he's carrying the cross. Wow. It's a symbol of the Roman religious and political system, and the top of the pyramid, the wealth thereof, is what it's symbolic of. But if we turn the page to this mystery Babylon in Revelation chapter 18, the merchants of the earth are weeping and crying because she's destroyed in 1 hour, and her ports, so this is a city with ports, which is why many would compare it to, well, this is where all the kings of the earth meet. This is what leads many to do comparisons to mystery Babylon being New York. Also, many others will speculate that it might be the Vatican or other locations. I would like to hold firm to just the concept for this particular film of the spirit behind Mystery Babylon, because no matter its location, and it could be right, it could in fact be multiplicities all in one. But the spirit behind Mystery Babylon, it is a spirit of prostitution, of wealth, and where the merchants and wealthy kings of the earth all have their seats, is what Mystery Babylon is referred to as in the text. And they trade their fine garments, fine linens, gold, pearls, spices of every type. And the last item listed is the trafficking, the slavery of human beings are traded, one of the prize traded possessions of these merchants of earth in the document John is writing in Revelation 18. And they weep profusely that the great whore city is gone. Now, I'd like to set that right in your hand for a moment and rewind all the way backwards to the origin of all of this, to perhaps the days of Nimrod, the great Mason tower builder, perhaps the first Freemason, he's sometimes called. And I'd like to rewind through all of these empires you see behind you here. You go from the Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Assyrians, and Assyrians. That is the empire really started by Nimrod. There are 6 ages of empires: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Some would call this that you're living in right now Rome Phase 2. But back at during the time of the Romans, you had the come-all-be-all sun god of sun gods. His name was Sol Invictus. He can be seen right here on this Constantine coin. Constantine is who amalgamated the political system of Rome with the religious system, forming what you know today as Catholicism. This happened during the time of the Romans. In fact, during the time of the Romans, Rome was never conquered. It fell under the bureaucracy and weight of itself. And all of your major empires for a time would turn into major religions. But all through the ages of history, kings would cover this strange character, this being of light, this sun god that would come forth and would literally tell kings, if you would just bow down to me, build your empires in praise to me, build grand idols to me, then I will give unto thee all the riches of the world. And in fact, these sun gods, so we go from right here, Sol Invictus of the Romans, Helios during the time of the Greeks, Mithra during the time of the Persians, the Shemesh during the time of the Babylonians, Ra for the Egyptians with the serpent, the sun disk encapsulated by the serpent on top of the head, and of course Utu during the time of the Assyrians, or Sumer and Akkad. All of these sun gods, and by the way, the sun god timeline here, so each set of beliefs is literally packaged into the next empire's beliefs. They build upon each other. And these would make the come-all-be-all mystery teachings, like Mystery Babylon, that would lead all the way to the days of the Greeks and the Romans, and even probably the teachings held in back rooms of this very day. Well, these sun gods in this very timeline here, actually, in truth, in the movie Evolve, they actually make Evolve 1 and Evolve Part 2. They actually, as we walk through and look at them, they actually make a dark prophecy. So this sun god being who's saying, just bow down to me, and I will give unto the empires. Well, these actually make a long, dark prophecy that's stating, when this suffering servant, when this Messiah comes, that you are to put the crown of thorns onto his head. You are to crucify him. You are to sacrifice him. So that's actually what the teachings of all of these empires lead to. But if I rewind backwards from the Romans, the Greeks, the Persians, Babylonians, Egyptians, Assyrians, all the way back to the days right here of Dark Lord Nimrod, son of Cush, son of Ham, son of Noah, with the 3 sons that got off of that boat. You see a division in the beliefs of the families, something that happened here. Something that happened with Ham's sons, seen right here. He had 4 of them. And a dispute that Ham had with Noah, where Ham basically states he put a curse on Ham's son, Canaan, that we're going to get to in a minute. But all occult today, so through Cush, you get Babylon and Nimrod. Through this lineage here, Cush, that was the favorite son of Ham. And over here, Egypt, otherwise called Mitzrayim, is where you get the empire of Egypt. All occult today comes from Babylonian and Egyptian belief systems. And Babylon and its beliefs and its disagreements with Noah, they're seen on the very rocks, come to this lineage right here. Nimrod, named in Merker, most probably in the ancient world. Right here on the document, in Merker and the Lord of Arata, Cush, we find covered on the Sumerian kings list. And by the way, Cush is covered as having made travel across the seas fit for the son of a sun god. So we know by that alone that his father, Ham, or Utu, was already calling himself a sun god. This is Utu's sun disk up here. It's got the 4 cardinal points and the 3 wavy lines. It represents a calendar, but it's also a sun disk is what it is. And it's eerily similar to what you find, not only the temples that we're building out there. On one side, I have Sumerian, Akkadian, over here with the sun disk for Utu, the father of Meshki and Gasher, or Cush. And over here, I have a Mayan temple, a Mayan calendar for the temples of the sun. Meshki and Gasher journeyed and then vanished into the seas and made travel suitable for the son of the sun god. Now, was he the one that founded the empires out there in the Americas? I don't know. I can only tell you that the building structures look identical. They're temples to the sun, and even these sun discs look very similar. If we come backwards one more, we make it to Utu, the Shamash. His idols look identical to the god Enlil, who is the twin of Enki. We'll touch on that a little bit. Here's the long and short of that in my view. When Utu or Ham does something wrong, it wasn't really Ham that did it. It wasn't really Utu that did it. That was the god Enlil. Then we come back one more, and we find the one that they both loved and hated. They talked about Noah under hundreds of different names and hundreds of languages on, I don't know how many documents, at least hundreds, spreading out all across the earth. In those documents, you can even see the dispute, the split up in the families, where one side, all of the kids made mistakes. Ham never reconciled with his father. That's what I read on the rocks. And Ham, the great sun god, is the eye back there, couldn't keep his hands off other people's kids. That's according to their own documents and legends, all the way down after that. And Noah got mad. But no matter the case, that rewinds us back to about right here, in the division of the sons and the birth of what we today call Babylon. Now, the Tower of Babel, and I just want to toss some loose math out there for you. I would like to submit to your hands the argument right here at the start that, well, so if you do the, so the Tower of Babel appears, and then we'll argue this, to be about 300 to 325 years. And I don't want to be rock solid on these numbers. I just want to lay some numbers out for you. Roughly 325 years after the flood. If I go with a low population growth rate, beginning with 8 people, at a growth rate of 3.5%, and that's, there's not a lot to do but build temples and breed like rabbits in the evenings. That number could be a lot higher than that. But even at these lowball numbers, you're at 900,000 people on the earth at the time of the building of that tower. And I would further argue that many of the beliefs that you have that go today by the name Mystery Babylon don't just come through the lineage, directly through the lineage of Ham, but actually come more directly through this son that for whatever reason Noah was so angry that he didn't put a curse on Ham, he put it on this son, Canaan, the one for whom you get the imagery or Lord of the imagery today of the little devil horns. Now, I'd like to walk you through the origin of this Babylonian beast, this system. That's what it is. The beast of Babylon is it's a system, is what it is. And I'd like to walk you back through all the way to the origin of that system, and it comes to these 3 sons. And all of these ages of empires that you see on the screen right behind me. And I really honestly hope that in the future that your universities will actually take much of this kind of stuff seriously, because these documents, no one will argue that many of these documents, this one here, the Sumerian Kings List, I went through myself and have itemized out what each section means. And it doesn't necessarily make me right. Put it out there for you to decide if it's right, but it's probably closer than it was over at the universities, because their every other word is it can't match with the Bible, but they do. And the simplest explanation is, so the pagan stuff, demons are good, and the biblical stuff, demons are bad. But they're telling roughly the same story. And I can't tell you if these documents are correct. Probably not, many of them, particularly the pagan stuff. It's pagan stuff. But I can tell you what they were stating. For example, here in the Sumerian Kings List, this is one of your earliest documents on the face of the entire earth. And the model of all of your pyramids that would pop up all over the place, including out here in the Americas. They began right out there in Sumer and Akkad, not far from where the boat that saved all mankind, Noah's Ark, landed. The Sumerian Kings List, the first 3 sections. The pre-flood world is lines 1 through 39. By the way, over at GodInANutshell.com, I've actually broken down what are the elements, without going weird directions on this stuff, but laying it out flat in your hand in ways that probably make a lot of sense, even to a kooky old university professor who would prefer to tell you stories about anything but what the documents just state. Lines 1 through 39 deal with the pre-flood world. Lines 40 through 94, or roughly thereabout, they deal with the families and tribes after the flood. This is going to match, by the way, with the pages of Genesis leading to the Tower of Babel account, which is where you arrive at right here, and what I've titled The Rise of Nimrod's Empire, which is going to be on that document, that pagan stone, in my view, lines 95 through 133. That's what it's simply going to be. And in this presentation I'm showing you now, I'm going to walk you through the literal birth of these sun gods, from the Romans all the way back to the very beginning when those boys came off of that boat. My name is Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell, and what I have behind me here on the screen is the God in a Nutshell website. A lot of people have asked what happened. So it was a time period for actually several years where I didn't post anything. We were working on, I put together a series of films in that time frame that I think are some of the best work that we've ever done. But people have asked, and here's some of the DVDs on the back screen. This is the God in a Nutshell website at GodInANutshell.com. Many have asked, why were you silent for so long? I'm going to tell you right here in this part of the film. I had a flooding, was working on the film Exodus, and I nearly had that completed. And I had a devastating flooding, destroyed my entire home and what I was working on at that time, actually right when I was about to get married as well. And I lost all of it, and it destroyed me for a period of time. I believe the Lord does all things, as devastating as it was, I believe the Lord does all things for a reason. And I believe we are heading forward to put together that Exodus. The films that are in that partner section, I believe, are some of the best work that I've ever done. And the Lord did some shaking of me at that time. I want to thank all of you that have become partners on the God in a Nutshell website. It's about $8 a month. Honestly speaking, it's what allows me to do these films at all. But I'd also like to ask you to pray this with me. I would like to do the best Exodus in the world, if that's possible, but at least the best we've done. And it will be better than what I had before when I make it. The top of this screen, we have a donate button.
It's 2 months
And
old.
if the Lord places it on your heart, I do not think I will let you down. I think we're going to make some incredible work. I think there's some incredible work in there right now. And I'm also praying for a home for me and my wife again, and a place to do these films. That we've kind of done it in makeshift ways. And I thank you for hearing me. There's a donate button on the top. And I thank you for watching these films at all over time. I'm Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. These sections that I'm about to play for you come out of the movie The Vault Part 1, or Part 1 and Part 2, which is in my hand. I'm working currently on the Vault 3, and I'm going to make it through the Exodus. I'm going to do that this year. Come Out of the Vault Part 1, which is available in full length for streaming on GardnerNetShow.com. I titled these parts The Babylon Beast, The Origin. I think it's a good presentation of them. As far as I know, it's one of the first times in history that people have put together the biblical text and the biblical story with the actual stuff out there from Sumer and Akkad and the ancient world and broken it down and amalgamated it. And it fits far better than anyone could have, myself included, would have imagined. And I would pray that in the future that the universities take it more seriously. These sections are called the Babylon Beast, the Origin. And I think between the Bible and even the pagan text, all of it was put together for you to have in your hands. In fact, for these hours of history right now. Without further ado, let's step into the parts of these films behind me that deal with the literal birth of the systems that you have even with you today, the birth of Babylon. And taking that a step further in the lineage of these 11 sons becoming the 11 Canaanite tribes, you're going to have, well, in those tribes, you have ones like the Hivites. It means wicked, wickedness. Cavemen, their ancestor was Seer, meaning hairy, goat, demon, tempest. And even the Apkelu, which are going to be intermingled even in that legend of Enlil and Menlil, she's going before the Anoks, the Anunnaki priests, in those Sumerian texts. These are somehow at the heart. There were 7 of these Apkelu sages listed right here at the heart of Utu, the first sun god's empire. And I even find their positions interesting. Because Uana, that's possibly one, a sage or conjurer for Emana. Then we come down here.
What about when you had 1,400 subs, Han? That was really cool.
In Enlora, the conjurer for the city of Eridu. That's where the Tower of Babel would rise. And of course, number 7 would be Utu Abzu, the one who ascended into heaven, which is a twisted version of who Enoch was. Here's where I'm going with this. In some strange way, at the heart of Utu, or Ham's empire, when he left, he's actually recreating the other 7 family members, the other 7 seats of authority or power, but in a twisted and upside down way, almost like a creepy way, where whatever he asks, no matter what it is, his conjurers holding those same seats as Noah and his brothers and their wives would hold, in my view, in my spirit, he's literally recreated those 7 positions in an occult format, and sometimes has them put on outfits to pretend that they are pre-flood chimera creatures, to pretend that they are conjuring the spirits of his ancestors like Enoch and giving him the answers that he wants. And even more so, speaking of Enoch, well, here's his 7 sages of Sumer right here. If we're to look over at Enoch, the 7th from Adam, a twisted version of which is on this Enoch stone right here. Utu Abzu is what he had the nerve to call it. Utu, a reference to himself, and Abzu, a reference to the abyss, the place the Inky comes from. Well, his 7 sages of Sumer, or his Apkelu or Anunnaki sages, sons from which you get those giants out there in the promised land, are literally a recreation of the 7 angels that you read about, a dark version of the 7 angels you're reading about, that Enoch had communication with in that pre-flood world. Uriel, Raphael, Raguel, Michael, Serakel, Gabriel, and Ramiel is what he's recreating on those stones. It's creepy, isn't it? But no matter the case or how any views it, he is depicted on these stones. There's Utu right there, coming up from between the mountains with his witch's hat on. There's Inanna with her 6 arrows in her back, and he's being guided by the Inky, coming out of his dimensional portal to Abyss. That's specifically where it's from, with his falcon, his raven, his crow, to start the new cities of Earth. The cities of Sippar, Babylon, ultimately going down to Kish or Cush, Uruk or Larsa, all the way down here to where the Tower of Babel was. as well as with Nineveh and other cities that his sons and grandsons would found. The basis of all of these cities, what would be called the mystery religions, and the basis of all of these rocks is sexual immorality. And what you're really reading on all of these stones, whether you're dealing with the Enuma Elish or others, and certainly in my view, and certainly on the Atrahasis tablet, on the Epic of Gilgamesh, is a split off of the families. On one side, demons good. On the other side, demons bad. In short, of the three brothers, it's not just Ham that's leaving, but also he's taking with him this entire bunch here, which is going to go from Cush, from whom you get Nimrod, to Put, another one of his four sons, to Egypt, or Mitzrayim. This is actually where you get the word Egypt, is from that son, and the teachings that come through him. And then, of course, last but not least, the one that I'd like to focus on, right down here, Canaan. Now, the word Canaan is seen right here. Ham's son, after the flood, Canaan. The word means humiliated. That's what the word means. However, if we look at this genealogy again, the one for whom Noah lived 950 years, 350 of that after the flood. Well, all three of Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, all three of these boys were born roughly in the 500th year of Noah's life. 5 is the number of grace. The flood happened in the 600th year of Noah's life, meaning that all three of these boys lived roughly 100 years, right there is Shem, right down from Noah, Shem, 100 years before that flood. So when it states in your text that these boys were young men, but they lived 100 years before the flood, here again you have another example of the definition of young man is 100 years old. They, for 100 years, physically saw that pre-flood world. All three of those boys did. And Shem lived a total of 600 years, that's the number of man, and 500 of it, the number of grace, was after that flood. But all three boys lived roughly 100 years before that flood. So where did this name Canaan, perhaps a strange one, or a strange lineage of things, what would lead to giants and other such things, where did this name Canaan come from? Ham's son, who after the flood, Canaan means humiliated. Well, before the flood, you have, if I come down this list from Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan. Only Canaan in English can be spelled a variety of different ways. Adam, Seth, Enosh, Canaan. The fourth one down from Adam. Canaan. Now, of course, this thing reads in order. Man appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down teaching, that's Enoch's name. His death, whose death? God's death, shall bring the despairing, that's you and I, rest and comfort, that's Noah's name. But if I come up here from Adam, which means man, Seth, which means appointed. Seth was the replacement for Abel, who Cain killed. Cain murdered Abel. And Eve asked for another son to replace Abel, whom Cain slew wrongly. And that son was Seth. And this is the lineage and genealogy that we follow here. Whereas you've got in that pre-flood world another genealogy, the genealogy of Cain, who killed Abel. But it's not this genealogy that begins after Adam with the one with the replacement for Abel. And then you have Enosh, his name means mortal. And then we have fourth one down, probably the weakest name in the entire list, Canaan. And Canaan means, right there, it means sorrow. That's what it means. Now, what happened in the days of Canaan? Well, in the book of Yasher, specifically Yasher 2, it states this, beginning in verse 11. And Canaan grew up. Now, this is the pre-flood Canaan, fourth from Adam. His name means sorrow. And when he was 40 years old, he became wise and had knowledge and skill in all wisdom. And he reigned over all the sons of men. And he led the sons of men to wisdom and knowledge, for Canaan was a very wise man. And he had understanding and all wisdom. Wait a second, what kind of wisdom was this? And with his wisdom, he ruled over the world of spirits and demons. What was it that Ham fantasized about when he started calling himself the sun god? There's his little box of demons down there that he controls. Let me keep going. In life,
You have to play by the rules. Fit in.
but Canaan, even in this, even the weakest on the list, number 4, his name means sorrow, and knew by his wisdom, even playing with the spirits and demons as he did, that God would one day destroy the sons of men for having sinned upon the earth, and that the Lord would in later days bring upon them the waters of the flood. And in those days, Canaan, he wrote upon tablets of stone. And he kept those tablets in his treasuries. Well, if we look back up here and we look at Sippar, where Utu had his first Ebabar, his White House, tablets like these that have all the festivals and all the law, even written by later kings, tablets like these were to be kept in boxes like this one in the sun god, the king's treasuries. Now, if I keep coming down this list from Adam on down, and Canaan, in the days of Canaan, it says he turned some men to the Lord. But he also believed that he had power over spirits and demons, just like Utu did, the first sun god. Almost as if all of these documents here are somebody reaching into the dark parts of the pre-flood world and fantasizing about them, and fantasizing moreover about the sons of Cain, which you see really pop up during the days of the pre-flood Canaan. But if I keep going down that list, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, what do you know about that? Number 6. Was it not in the days of Yared that we read, the father of Enoch, the 6th from Adam, Yared would be, was in the days of Yared that we read the events of Genesis 6 and the events of Enoch 6, where a set of fallen angels came in onto Mount Hermon, at the base of which is Pan's cave, where they would sacrifice children.
Wow, he linked that up. That's pretty cool.
And in those hours before the flood, men were worshiping these fallen angels who had come in to play gods and lords and masters and kings with mankind, and to take of the women. And we begin first learning about all of the practices of the summoning of demons and communication of demons. Just as we see when we look at the author of this stone, which of course would begin with Utu, the first sun god of earth. It's his scribes, it's his children that are authoring these kings' lists. And it's not this list of names that's getting praise, but to the complete contrary, it's this list here, which seems intermingled. Lord Anak, Lord Anak, Lord Anak. And between them is Dumazid, which is another name for Tammuz, Enkidu, the seed of sin. Enkidu means Enki created, which is the name of Gilgamesh's friend. Are we talking about one and the same with Canaan on that list and the giants that would later inhabit the promised land? I have no idea. I'd lay that in your hands. But I know on these stones is always, and on this list here, is intermingled entirely, and they make it abundantly clear on the rocks. The summoning of fallen entities, demons, and devils is what they're literally talking about. And it's integrated right with the name of this one on their text. But whoever had authored these documents had forgotten the names of their fathers on this list here. And in fact, if I come down from Enoch, who would be the 7th from Adam, the Zion, and I come down to the 9th, the number 9, could be something good in there, could not be something good in there. The number 9th on this list would be Lamech. And I go over and I come over to the book of Enoch, chapter 106, being that they so badly in those worlds after that flood wanted their sun gods, their Prometheus, best known for defying the gods. This could be the story of Lucifer, could be the story of 1/3 of the angels that fell, or it could be the story of one of the three brothers that fell, who took on the personification of a sun god. After all, the Prometheus is best known for defying the gods by stealing fire from them and giving it to humanity in the form of technology, knowledge, and civilization. Only he didn't do that. He even held back the calendar from his own sons so that he could be the sun god. That's what he did. That's the truth of the matter. But what was he? He was a crafty trickster to the Greeks and Romans, but also the light bearer, coming forth to birth those first civilizations of all earth. Well, perhaps the author of these stones, looking at all of these fallen angels and beings, if that be Ham, one of the three, on his own rocks, forgot the story of his father, the 10th, the number of completion, the 10th from Adam, Noah, meaning rest or comfort. The story given by Enoch in his line, the 7th from Adam. And being that the author of these stones is also the birther, Egypt and Babylon, of all the mystery religions on earth, perhaps he also forgot that Enoch went into those fallen angels.
Yep.
And said, the Lord God of heavens bears a message for you. You thought you knew secrets. Little did you know you only knew the worthless ones. And perhaps even beginning in the days of Ham's son, Utu's son, Cush, Meshki, and Gasher, who took off on a boat, perhaps to brand the image of the sun god and the temples to the moon all across the Americas and jungles of the ancient world, where they would worship as royalty and kings anything strange. Well, before that time, in the time of that pre-flood world, when Enoch went into the temples of Semyaza and Azazel, the two heads of the 200 angels who had fallen upon Mount Hermon, the base of which is the cave they would give child sacrifice to the god Pan. And Enoch said to those angels, the Lord God of the heavens has said you should intercede for men and not men for you. Behold, a heavy sentence has gone forth to put thee in bonds. Never again shall ye return into the heavens for all eternity. It was then, according to the text, that big, tough, fallen angels tore their clothes and wailed and screamed in their dark, torchlit halls. And Uriel said to me, here shall stand the angels that have connected themselves with the women, and their spirits, assuming different forms, are defiling mankind as sun gods and moon gods through the ages and hours of history, and shall lead them astray into sacrificing to demons as their gods. That's what the text states. Here they shall stand until the day of the great judgment. God's been talking about this since the beginning of the book, where they will be judged and made an end of. And the women also of the angels, the women that combined with the angels who went astray, shall become as sirens. And I, Enoch, saw the vision and the end of all things. No man shall see as I have seen. But wait. Enoch 81, and Uriel said unto me, observe, Enoch, these heavenly tablets. Would these possibly be the same tablets of destiny, and those that decide destinies of the righteous, that Utu, dear Utu, was talking about to his son, that he claimed his Apkelu conjurer's hand? I think not. Or are these the
Yeah, Han, that's probably the best link of all. That's a good channel.
tablets that Moses spoke of when he was on top of the mountain, being told by the tongue of Enoch to his children that Utu, the first sun god of earth, wished he could get back to? These documents were on the boat, I'll tell you that right now. Observe, ye Enoch, these heavenly tablets, and read what is written thereon, and mark every individual fact. And I mean the words of Enoch, the actual scrolls of Enoch, the book of Enoch was on board the boat, not the heavenly tablets that he's recording and telling his sons about. Just wanted to clarify that. And I observed the heavenly tablets and read everything which was written thereon, and understood everything, and read the book of the deeds of all mankind, the book of the living, and of all the children of flesh that there shall be upon the earth to the remotest of generations. And therewith I blessed the great Lord and King of glory forever and ever, in that he has made all the works of the world. The demons would claw their clothes and give anything to have their name written one time in that book. And I extolled the Lord because of his patience, and blessed him because of the children of men. And after that I said, blessed is the man who dies in righteousness. Noah was called the righteous, even on all these pagan stones, even by the god of the air Enlil, that ran with Utu from the mountains. It was the righteous who decide destinies, was it not, of whom he spoke? Blessed is the one that dies in righteousness and goodness, concerning whom there is no book of unrighteousness written, and against whom no day of judgment shall be found. These words were on the boat with Noah. And those seven holy ones, had Utu created seven dark ones? Seven dark ones? Seven dark Apkelu witch doctor conjurers? The same as Nimrod had in his court, with Enochi as their head, who would birth all the children of abomination? What are we copying here? These seven holy ones brought me and placed me at the door of my house, and said to me, declare everything to thy son Methuselah, and show to all thy children that no flesh is righteous in the sight of the Lord, for he is their creator. 1 year we will leave thee with thy son, till thou givest thy last commands, that thou may teach thy children. These records we give you now, that you may share them, these words, on that boat with all the generations of the world. In his 600th year, and much has happened, his father, Lamech, passed away 5 years before, and his grandfather...
He's got a good one on Noah that goes for like 2 hours. I'll do that tomorrow, guys.
Methuselah. Now, Methuselah's name means his death shall bring. Methuselah, his name means his death shall bring, or his death shall bring the judgment. Died in the past year. So the year of the flood, Methuselah had died, or 7 days before the flood. Died at the age of 969. Methuselah was the longest living man in the text. But if I come from Adam down to Noah, actually Noah's father, Lamech, in the book of Enoch, the seventh from Adam, and being that they all went to such lengths to birth even the empires all the way to the Romans and their sun gods, beginning with Utu, and to defeat that true son of God, put the crown of thorns on his head. And in Utu's case, old Utu, thrown from the two mountain peaks, to impersonate a claimed sun god. Well, surely, in that case, leading all the way to these, they perhaps knew this story from Enoch, who they also twisted. And here we go. Enoch, chapter 106. And after some days, my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech. Here's Methuselah right here. He's the longest living man in your biblical text at 969 years. His name means his death shall bring, or his death shall bring the judgment. His son is Lamech, whose son would be Noah. Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore a son. And his body was white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose. And the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes were beautiful. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun. And the whole house was very bright, and thereupon he arose, his child arose in the hands of the midwife. And he opened his mouth, and he conversed with the Lord of righteousness. Who is this? And his father, Lamech, was afraid of him, and fled the house. And he went to his father Methuselah, and he said unto him, For I have begotten a very strange son, diverse from and unlike man, and resembling perhaps the sons of God of heaven, the angels, the B'nai Ha-Elohim is what he's stating. And his nature is different, and he is not like us. And his eyes are as the rays of the sun, and his countenance is glorious.
Wow.
And it seems to me that he is not sprung from me, but from the angels. And I fear that in his days a great work, a great wonder, a great fear may be wrought upon the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition thee and implore thee that thou mayest go to Enoch, our father, and learn from him the truth. For his dwelling place, Enoch's dwelling place, is amongst the angels. Enoch never actually died in your text. Enoch was not, for God took him. His son was Methuselah, and Methuselah went. And then it states here, and by the way, the book of Enoch, as it gets down into it, is actually, there are portions even of excerpts of Noah. It's more like a family record. And in my belief, it would have been kept on that boat. But no matter what you believe, here's what it reads next. And I, Enoch, answered and said unto him, Methuselah, the Lord will do a new thing on the earth. And this I have already seen in a vision. And make known to thee that in the generation of my father, Yered, some of the angels did go astray. They transgressed the word of the Lord. And behold, they have united themselves with women on the earth and have committed a great sin with them. And some of the angels have married some of the women of earth and have begotten children by them. And they shall produce on the earth giants, not according to the spirit, but according to the flesh. And there shall come a great punishment on the earth. And the earth shall be cleansed from all impurity. Enoch.
In other words, the whole world was baptized. That's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Continues. Yea, indeed, there shall come a great destruction over the whole earth. And there shall be a great deluge, that means a flood, and a great and mighty destruction for 1 year on the earth. Yet this son who has been born unto you shall be left on the earth.
Yep, it's definitely Noah, because he's the last one left on the earth.
And his 3 children shall be saved with him. When all mankind that are on the earth shall perish, shall die in this flood, he, this one that converses with the Lord of heaven, and his 3 sons shall be saved. And now go and make known to thy son Lamech that he who has been born into his house
Okay, hang on. That usually means Wi-Fi's dropped out. Hang on, guys. Connected. Oh man, which one was it? Oh, that finished.
is actually, they're portions even of excerpts of Noah.
No,
It's more like a family record. And in my belief, it would have been kept on that boat. But no matter what you believe, here's what it reads next. And I, Enoch, answered and said unto him, Methuselah, the Lord will do a new thing on the earth. And this I have already seen in a vision. And make known to thee that in the generation of my father, Yered, some of the angels did go astray. They transgressed the word of the Lord. And behold, they have united themselves with women on the earth and have committed a great sin with them. And some of the angels have married some of the women of earth and have begotten children by them. And they shall produce on the earth giants, not according to the spirit, but according to the flesh. And there shall come a great punishment on the earth. And the earth shall be cleansed from all impurity. Enoch continues, yea, indeed, there shall come a great destruction over the whole earth, and there shall be a great deluge, that means a flood, and a great and mighty destruction for 1 year on the earth. Yet this son who has been born unto you shall be left on the earth, and his 3 children shall be saved with him. When all mankind that are on the earth shall perish, shall die in this flood, he, this one that converses with the Lord of heaven, and his 3 sons shall be saved. And now go and make known to thy son Lamech that he who has been born into his house is in truth his son. And you shall call his name Noah. My name is Trey Smith of God in a Nutshell. That was only about 30 minutes of one of the Vav films available for streaming over at godinanutshell.com. In that same partners section over at godinanutshell.com, you'll find a film in there titled The Last Prophecy. It's about 2.5 hours long. By the way, both of these Vav films are roughly 3 hours, maybe a little bit better in one of the cases of the Vavs, a little more than 3 hours long. The Last Prophecy, I timelined out the prophecies of Kim Clement. I also combined them with some other things.
Oh, Jay, I'm just about to bail out, mate. Good to see you, though.
Heavy duty presentation in my view of those prophecies, and the best that I've done. I would only feel comfortable with that longer version, a 2.5 hour version, in that partner section at God in a Nutshell, and I think you'll see why when you look at the film. Here on the screen behind me, this is all these shots, by the way. Actually, this is the road on the partner section right here. It's the road from Silverton to Ouray in Colorado. Most all the shots, including in Israel and other places, that you see on all these different screens on God in a Nutshell, were actually taken. I would hook up cameras to the front of the car and drive down risky places to catch.
Okay, guys, I'm out. He's doing one tomorrow. I'm doing his one on Noah. Goes 3.5 hours. So see you tomorrow, guys. Jeremiah, sorry, mate. I was just hanging up when you showed up. God bless you guys. See you tomorrow.